The Carter mansion sat on a quiet, elite hill where nothing bad was ever supposed to happen. To the outside world, Ethan Carter, one of Ridgewood's youngest real estate millionaires, had the perfect new family, a successful career, a beautiful wife, and a gentle little daughter who followed him everywhere. But behind the polished walls of their home lived a truth no guest had ever sensed, and no one dared to question. 8-year-old Mabel Carter had always been a soft-spoken child, the kind who apologized even when she wasn't wrong. Since Ethan remarried, her voice had only grown smaller, thinner, as if each word she spoke might break something fragile in the air. And on this particular evening, as golden sunlight spilled through the wide hallway windows, she tiptoed toward the storage room, toward the old wooden ladder leaning against the wall. She only wanted one thing: the watercolor set her late mother had given her years ago. The box was tucked high on the top shelf, where Evelyn, her stepmother, had moved it for safekeeping. Mabel missed her mother terribly that day, so she climbed. One careful step, then another. Her small hands shook as she reached upward, stretching her fingers toward the box. Her heart pounded, not from height, but from fear of being caught doing something she wasn't allowed to do. Just as she felt the edge of the watercolor box brush against her fingertips, the storage room door creaked open behind her. Evelyn stood in the doorway, elegant, emotionless, her voice soft as ice. "What do you think you're doing up there?" Mabel froze, breath caught in her throat. And then Evelyn stepped closer. Something in her eyes warned that the real danger had only just begun. Mabel Carter had once been the kind of child who filled every room with laughter. Before she lost her mother, she used to dance around the living room, spinning until she got dizzy and fell into Ethan's arms. He remembered those days vividly, her little giggles, her paint-stained fingers, her stories that never seemed to end. She was bright, open, soft, and gentle in a way that made strangers instantly adore her. But grief changes people, especially children. After her mother passed away, something quiet slipped into Mabel's spirit. She no longer talked freely. She clung to her father more often, waking him up at night just to make sure he was still there. Ethan tried everything: therapy, art classes, weekend trips, but nothing filled the empty place in her heart. He was a good man, but he was also a man drowning in his own grief. Running a business while raising a grieving child alone left him exhausted, lonely, and desperately hoping for help. That was when Evelyn walked into his life. Beautiful, polished, soothing. She spoke with a grace that calmed any room she entered. When Ethan introduced her to Mabel, the little girl hid behind his legs, staring silently. Evelyn bent down, smiling sweetly, promising she would take care of both of them. At first, Ethan believed her. She cooked dinners, decorated the house for holidays, bought Mabel expensive dolls. Ethan saw these gestures and thought they meant love. But children feel things adults overlook. Ever since Evelyn moved in, Mabel's world slowly shrank. She spoke less, smiled less. When Ethan asked how she felt about her stepmother, Mabel would whisper, "She's different when you're not here." Ethan took it as normal adjustment. He told himself every blended family had a rough beginning. Besides, Evelyn always looked so patient in front of him, calm, understanding, the picture of a composed woman trying her best. Yet Mabel's behavior changed in ways that kept Ethan awake at night. She startled easily. She avoided certain rooms. She flinched at sudden footsteps. She locked her bedroom door even during the day. Ethan asked her why, and she simply shook her head, eyes heavy with something a child should never carry. Still, he convinced himself that time would heal everything. He wanted so badly to believe he had rebuilt a safe home. He wanted to believe Evelyn brought stability, not tension. But deep down, Mabel knew the truth. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place where she had to measure every breath, every step, every word. And on the night she climbed that ladder, her whole world, already trembling, was about to break open in a way no one could ignore. Because every secret eventually finds the light. The Carter mansion stood like a monument on the Ridgewood hillside, its towering windows glowing warmly every evening, giving the illusion of comfort and safety. Inside, however, the air often felt chilled, as if something unseen pressed against the walls. For Mabel, the mansion was far from comforting. It was a maze of silent corners, rooms she avoided, and long hallways where echoes followed her like shadows. After Evelyn moved in, the house changed in ways subtle enough for adults to miss, but loud enough for a child to feel. The kitchen, once filled with warmth and the smell of her mother's cooking, became stiff and overly organized. The living room, where Mabel used to color on the carpet, turned into a display space where she was told, "Don't touch anything." Even her bedroom, once her sanctuary, felt different. Evelyn redecorated it with expensive furniture, pastel curtains, and shelves holding things Mabel didn't choose. Everything looked perfect, but nothing felt like it belonged to her. Ethan rarely noticed the tension. He left early for work and returned late, exhausted, grateful that Evelyn kept the household running. Whenever he walked in, Evelyn greeted him with calmness and practiced warmth, masking every crack beneath her smile. To him, she was improving the home. To Mabel, she was tightening it. What Mabel feared most were the moments Ethan wasn't home. Those hours turned the mansion into a quiet arena where the slightest mistake, an unwashed cup, a toy left out, could earn her a cold reprimand. Evelyn rarely raised her voice. Instead, she spoke in a controlled, cutting tone that made Mabel feel smaller than ever. Still, the room that haunted Mabel most wasn't the kitchen or her bedroom. It was the storage room. That was where Evelyn stashed everything connected to Mabel's mother, claiming the house needed a fresh start. And it was in that very room, on that fateful evening, that Mabel climbed the ladder, desperate to feel close to her mother again, unaware that Evelyn was right behind her, watching every trembling step. The air in the storage room felt colder than the rest of the mansion, carrying the faint scent of dust and forgotten belongings. Mabel never liked being in there, yet she returned again and again because it held the last pieces of her mother's world. Every box felt like a memory waiting to be touched, and every shelf felt like a reminder that Evelyn wanted those memories hidden. As Mabel climbed, the quiet around her deepened until she could hear only her heartbeat. She didn't know whether she feared falling or being caught, but she knew one thing: she couldn't leave her mother's belongings abandoned forever. Evelyn Moore Carter had mastered the art of appearing gentle. To outsiders, she was elegance wrapped in soft smiles. Charity chairwoman, polished hostess, the kind of woman who seemed incapable of raising her voice. But behind closed doors, her warmth evaporated like mist. She moved through the Carter mansion with the quiet authority of someone who believed the entire world should adjust itself around her. And when it didn't, she made sure it learned. From the moment she married Ethan, Evelyn treated Mabel not as a child to love, but as a tiny obstacle standing in her path to a flawless life. She never insulted Mabel outright. She didn't need to. Every sigh of annoyance, every sideways glance, every whispered, "Be better," sank deeper into the little girl's heart than any shouted command could. The tension between the two grew slowly, like a crack creeping through glass. Mabel tried to be perfect, quiet, helpful, invisible, but nothing she did was ever enough. When she drew too loudly, Evelyn would say, "You're disturbing the peace." When she stepped on the carpet with paint on her hands, Evelyn wiped the stain with a cloth and murmured, "Your mother would be disappointed." And when Ethan wasn't looking, Evelyn's mask slipped just enough for Mabel to see who she really was. But Ethan saw none of this. He believed Evelyn's serene exterior, her carefully measured kindness. He believed she was trying. It never occurred to him that adults could be cruel in ways children couldn't explain. So when Evelyn smiled and told Ethan, "She's just adjusting," he accepted the lie. He wanted peace, stability, a new chapter. Evelyn wanted control. The real shift happened a few weeks before the ladder incident, when Mabel accidentally spilled a cup of juice on the marble floor. Evelyn froze, staring at the spreading stain. Her voice stayed calm, but the calmness felt wrong. "Do you know how much this floor costs?" she asked softly. Mabel shook her head, holding her breath. Evelyn knelt down, leaned in close, and whispered a sentence that clung to Mabel for weeks. "Mistakes like this don't happen in my house." My house. Not our house, not Ethan's house, not Mabel's home. Evelyn had crossed a line only Mabel noticed. And now, standing behind the little girl on the ladder, Evelyn didn't see a child reaching for her mother's memory. She saw defiance. She saw a problem to correct. And with one quiet step forward, the rising conflict inside the Carter home was about to erupt into something no one could ignore. The storage room felt unnaturally still, the kind of silence that made the smallest sound echo too loudly. Mabel balanced on the ladder, fingers trembling as they brushed the corner of the watercolor box. She wanted to be quick, get the box, climb down, and disappear before Evelyn had the chance to get upset. But she was too late. She could feel Evelyn's presence behind her before hearing a word. The soft click of Evelyn's heels stopped directly beneath the ladder. "Mabel," she said calmly, "I didn't give you permission to go through these things." Mabel's heart pounded. I just wanted my mom's paints." "Your mother's things," Evelyn replied, her tone sharpening only slightly, "are stored away for a reason." That reason, of course, was Evelyn's need to erase anything that didn't fit her perfect image of the Carter household. But Mabel didn't dare say that out loud. She swallowed hard and reached again for the box, hoping, irrationally, that if she climbed down with it, Evelyn would let it go. Evelyn's voice grew colder. "Come down, now!" Mabel froze. She didn't know if obeying would help or make things worse. Her foot shifted nervously on the ladder and the wooden frame wobbled slightly. Evelyn stepped closer, placing a manicured hand on the side of the ladder. For one moment, she simply held it, steady, secure, as if she might help Mabel climb down safely. Then the shift happened. A tiny movement, almost nothing, but enough. The ladder slid just an inch, barely noticeable, but high enough for Mabel to lose her balance. Her arms flailed as she tried to grab the shelf, the air leaving her chest in a quick gasp. Evelyn stepped back, hands clasped neatly, expression smooth and unreadable. The fall was sudden, jarring, and frightening. Mabel landed on the wooden floor with a cry she couldn't hold back. Pain shot through her arm and leg, sharp enough to steal her breath. Tears blurred her vision as she tried to push herself up, but the pain was overwhelming. Evelyn didn't kneel beside her. She didn't comfort her. She didn't even look alarmed. Instead, she said quietly, "You should have listened. This is what happens when you disobey." Mabel's voice cracked. "It hurts!" Evelyn glanced at the door, checking if anyone else had heard. Then she crouched down, not to help, but to whisper, "If you tell your father anything besides I fell, you'll make everything worse for yourself. Do you understand?" Mabel nodded weakly, too scared to argue. But in the hallway, footsteps approached, and Ethan was closer than either of them realized. Ethan Carter had heard many sounds while living in that mansion. Doors closing, furniture shifting, echoes from distant rooms. But nothing made him stop cold like the sharp thud that echoed down the hallway, followed by a child's cry. Not just any cry, Mabel's. He dropped the folder he was holding and sprinted toward the storage room. The closer he got, the clearer the sound became. Small, gasping sobs, the kind a child made only when they were genuinely hurt or terrified. When he pushed open the door, the scene before him didn't make sense at first. Mabel on the floor, curled around her arm and leg, tears streaming down her cheeks. Evelyn standing nearby, perfectly composed, the ladder toppled sideways. Ethan rushed forward, kneeling beside Mabel. "Sweetheart, hey, I'm here. What happened? Are you hurt?" Mabel tried to speak, but the pain tightened her throat. Ethan could see she couldn't put weight on her leg, and her arm hung awkwardly at her side. He felt panic bloom in his chest. Before Mabel could force out a word, Evelyn stepped in smoothly. She climbed where she shouldn't have. I told her to wait, but she didn't listen. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, as if she were the one trying to soothe the situation. But Ethan wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Mabel, her trembling, the way her eyes darted between him and Evelyn, like she was choosing which truth she was allowed to tell. "Mabel," he whispered. "Sweetheart, did you fall? Tell Daddy what happened." Mabel opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Only fear, pure, heavy fear. Evelyn crouched slightly, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. She's frightened because she knows she shouldn't have been climbing. You know how sensitive she gets. Something about that explanation felt wrong, too polished, too practiced. Ethan looked again at Mabel. Her small fingers clutched his sleeve, holding on like he was the only safe thing left in the room. He softened his voice. Did someone scare you? Were you trying to get something? Mabel's lip trembled. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Not visibly, not enough for most people to notice, but Ethan caught it. A flicker, a warning, directed at a child. And that was the moment something inside Ethan shifted. He didn't know the full story yet, but he knew that his daughter was afraid of the woman standing 3 feet from her. He lifted Mabel gently into his arms. "I'm taking her to the hospital." Evelyn tried to speak again, but Ethan didn't give her the chance. As he carried Mabel out of the room, her arms tightened around his neck. And Ethan knew this wasn't an accident. This was the beginning of a truth he should have seen long ago. The hospital hallway smelled of disinfectant and quiet tension. Ethan paced back and forth while doctors examined Mabel in the adjacent room. He kept replaying the moment he found her. Her shaking hands, the fear in her eyes, the way she clung to him like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. Every detail twisted deeper into his chest. Something wasn't right. Something had been wrong for a long time. When the doctor finally emerged, Ethan rushed forward. "How is she? Is she going to be okay?" "She's stable," the doctor said gently. "Her injuries need care, but she's going to recover. Children are resilient." Relief washed over Ethan, but it didn't last long. The doctor continued, lowering his voice. "Her injuries don't appear to be from a single moment of clumsiness. They suggest she may have fallen awkwardly or been startled. Has this kind of thing happened before?" Ethan felt his stomach drop. "No, at least, I don't think so." The doctor hesitated. "If you ever feel there's something happening at home that might be contributing to her accidents, please tell us. We're obligated to ensure her safety." The implications stung. Ethan wasn't angry at the doctor. He was angry at himself. Had he been so blinded by wanting a picture-perfect family that he ignored what his daughter was trying to show him? Before he could respond, Evelyn appeared around the corner, heels tapping sharply against the tile floor. Her expression was perfectly arranged, concerned, patient, worried, but still composed. She approached Ethan with a soft sigh. "Is she all right? I've been so worried." Ethan didn't answer. He just stepped aside to block her view into Mabel's room. "You should go home," he said quietly. Evelyn blinked, surprised. "Go home, Ethan. She needs both of us." "She needs me," he said firmly. "Just me tonight." A subtle shift crossed Evelyn's face, too small for strangers to notice, but impossible for Ethan to miss now. Annoyance, irritation, control slipping. "Ethan," she whispered, "you're upset. You're tired. Let's not make this dramatic. Mabel climbed somewhere she shouldn't have. It happens." He studied her carefully. Her expression, her tone, her poise, it was all too smooth, too rehearsed. And when she reached out to place a hand on his arm, he stepped back. For the first time, Ethan saw the truth behind her eyes. A warning, not warmth. "I'm staying with my daughter," he said, voice steady. "Go home." Evelyn's smile was thin, fragile, unwilling. "As you wish." She turned and walked down the hall, but not before giving one last look. Sharp, cold, unmistakably threatening. When Ethan returned to Mabel's bedside, she looked at him with wide, exhausted eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "please don't make me go back home with her." And just like that, Ethan knew. Something terrible had been happening right under his roof, and this time he wouldn't look away. Ethan sat beside Mabel's hospital bed long after midnight, watching her small chest rise and fall beneath warm blankets. She was finally asleep, exhausted from pain and shock. The room was dim except for the soft glow of a hallway light leaking through the half-open door. Every few minutes, Ethan wiped his eyes, frustrated that he hadn't noticed sooner, frustrated at himself for trusting someone he barely understood. He reached forward and gently brushed a strand of hair from Mabel's forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." But reassurance wasn't enough, not anymore. When he stepped into the hallway to breathe, he found Dr. Hayes reviewing charts. The doctor approached him cautiously. "Mr. Carter, I'd like to share something confidentially." Ethan braced himself. "Your daughter shows signs of chronic stress," Dr. Hayes said gently. "She's jumpy, hypervigilant. That doesn't come from one fall. It comes from being afraid over time." Those words hit Ethan like a blow to the chest. "Afraid of what?" he asked, though the answer terrified him. "Only she can tell us." But children don't become this tense unless something around them constantly makes them feel unsafe. Ethan didn't sleep after that. He stayed awake, replaying moments he'd brushed aside. The way Mabel stiffened when Evelyn walked into a room. The whispered, "She's different when you're gone." The constant flinching. It all connected now, a pattern he should have recognized sooner. By morning, he had made a decision. He needed answers, not guesses. He called Julian Hart, a trusted security consultant who had once worked for him during a corporate dispute. Julian was known for being calm, thorough, and discreet. If anyone could figure out what had been happening inside his home, it was him. Julian arrived at the hospital within the hour, his expression serious the moment Ethan told him everything. "You think something's going on with your wife?" Julian asked softly. "I think something's been going on with my daughter," Ethan corrected. Julian nodded. "Then we'll start with the house. Your cameras, your logs, all of it." When Ethan and Julian returned briefly to the mansion later that morning, the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. The air seemed colder, the lights dimmer. Every photo frame on the wall, every perfectly placed decoration Evelyn had arranged felt like a reminder of how long he'd been looking in the wrong direction. Julian began checking the home security system, and within minutes his eyebrows knit together. "Did you know half your cameras were manually disabled?" he asked. Ethan felt his skin prickle. "No, why would they be?" Julian didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the upper floor, toward the storage room. "We might have a bigger problem than you realize." And in that silent hallway, Ethan felt a truth settle heavily in his chest. Whatever had happened to Mabel wasn't an accident, and he was finally ready to uncover everything. The mansion felt different now. Not like a home Ethan had worked years to build, but like a crime scene where something invisible had been stalking his daughter. Every polished surface, every neat corner, every quiet room felt like it carried pieces of a truth he had ignored for far too long. Julian moved through the house with a calm, methodical focus, checking panels, wiring, and logs, while Ethan followed closely behind, heart pounding with every discovery. "Look at this," Julian said, bending near the base of the staircase. "This camera was disabled 2 months ago, manually." Ethan frowned. "Manually? You mean someone physically tampered with it?" Julian nodded. "And whoever did it knew what they were doing." The words hit hard. Ethan knew he hadn't touched the cameras. Neither had Mabel. That left only one person. Julian continued his examination, guiding Ethan toward the upper level, where tension seemed to thicken with each step. When they reached the storage room, Ethan paused at the doorway. The ladder still lay where it had fallen. The shelf still held his late wife's belongings, sealed away like distant memories someone didn't want resurrected. Julian scanned the room, eyes narrowing. "There used to be a camera here too," he said, pointing to a small patch of discolored wall. "It's been removed." Ethan felt heat rush to his face, anger, guilt, fear all mixing together. Removed? Who would take it out? Julian didn't look away from the wall. Someone who didn't want anything recorded. The air seemed to thicken. Ethan leaned against the doorway, rubbing his temples. He had been so desperate to build a new life that he hadn't noticed it growing rotten beneath him. His daughter had been hurting right under his roof, and he had trusted the very person who made her afraid. Julian crouched near the ladder, inspecting scuff marks on the floor. "This didn't just fall," he muttered. "Something pushed it, hard enough to shift, but not hard enough to break the wood. Someone knew exactly how to make it look like a clumsy accident." Ethan felt his breath hitch. "Julian, are you saying—" "I'm saying," Julian interrupted gently, "that your daughter didn't fall on her own." Silence pressed into the room. Before Ethan could respond, the sound of a car door closing echoed outside. He moved to the window and saw Evelyn's sleek black vehicle pulling into the driveway earlier than expected. She stepped out calmly, perfect hair, perfect posture, as if the world belonged to her. Julian glanced at Ethan. "Do you want her to know we're investigating?" Ethan swallowed hard. "No, not yet." But as Evelyn walked toward the front door, something in her posture, something cold and confident, told Ethan she already suspected everything. And for the first time, she wasn't the only one watching. Evelyn stepped through the front door with the poise of someone entering her palace, not a home filled with unanswered questions. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, too sharp, too confident, as though she sensed a challenge in the air and welcomed it. Ethan and Julian were still upstairs when they heard her voice float through the house. "Ethan, are you home?" Julian glanced at him. "Stay calm. Don't confront her until you're ready. She's smart. She'll sense pressure." Ethan nodded, though confusion and anger churned inside him like a storm. He followed Julian downstairs slowly, every step heavy. When he reached the foyer, Evelyn turned toward him with a perfectly curated expression of concern. "Oh, thank God you're here." She rushed over and gently touched his arm. "I drove straight from the hospital. How's Mabel? Did she sleep? Did the doctors say anything else?" "Too much sweetness, too many questions, all too polished." "She's resting," Ethan replied, voice flat. "We'll know more soon." Evelyn's eyes flickered for just a second before she recovered her warmth. "Good, I've been so worried." Julian remained quiet in the corner, observing everything. Her posture, her tone, the way her eyes scanned the room, calculating. Evelyn finally noticed him. "Oh," she said with polite surprise. "Julian, isn't it? What brings you here?" Julian smiled mildly, his demeanor friendly but unreadable. "Routine security check. Mr. Carter wanted to make sure everything was running smoothly." Evelyn's stomach tightened almost imperceptibly, just a breath of tension, but enough for both men to catch it. "That's odd," she replied lightly. "Everything seemed fine when I left this morning." Ethan's jaw tightened. Some things weren't fine. She turned to him. "What do you mean?" But this time, Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at her, really looked at her, searching for the person he thought he knew. Instead, all he saw was a woman skilled at controlling every inch of her image, while his daughter shrank further into fear. Evelyn sensed the shift. Her smile faded just a touch. "Ethan, did someone say something? Did Mabel tell you?" "Mabel didn't tell me anything," he cut in quietly. "But someone has been disabling cameras. Someone removed one from the storage room." Evelyn froze. A single heartbeat passed. Then she laughed. Soft, controlled, almost condescending. "Oh, Ethan, you can't seriously think I would tamper with security cameras. Why would I ever do that?" Julian stepped forward slightly. Usually people disable cameras because they don't want to be seen. Evelyn's eyes sharpened like glass. The mask wasn't falling yet, but it was cracking. She looked between them slowly, calculating, deciding her next move. And for the first time since she entered the house, her smile vanished completely, because she realized they were finally seeing her clearly. Evelyn stood in the center of the living room, carefully controlling her breathing. She knew how to command a room, how to look soft instead of sharp, calm instead of cornered. But today, something was off. Julian's presence, Ethan's tone, the weight in the air, it all signaled danger, and Evelyn could feel the ground under her heels shifting. Ethan crossed his arms, something he rarely did. "Explain the cameras, Evelyn." She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Explain what? That we're having technical difficulties? It happens. This house is old, Ethan." Julian glanced around at the marble, glass, and modern architecture. "This house is many things," he said dryly, "but old is not one of them." Evelyn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She shifted her weight, placing a hand on her hip. "Are you accusing me of something? Tampering with cameras? For what purpose?" "Exactly what I'd like to know," Ethan replied. She blinked slowly, calculating. "Ethan, this is ridiculous. You're stressed. You spent the whole night at the hospital and you're exhausted. Let's take a breath. Let's talk like adults." But Ethan wasn't buying it, not anymore. The room felt colder as he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Why was the camera removed from the storage room?" Evelyn looked directly at him, eyes sharp and unwavering. "I have no idea. Maybe it broke. Maybe the installer forgot to secure it properly." She shrugged. "Why would I care about a storage room?" Julian stepped forward, holding a small device he'd found earlier. "Because," he said calmly, "the log shows the camera was disabled from inside the house, and whoever did it knew the system password." Evelyn's lips parted, just a fraction. Then her eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting I would ever do anything to hurt this family?" Ethan didn't answer at first. He simply looked at her, really looked at the woman he had married, and the more he stared, the more he saw the cracks he had tried so hard to ignore. "You were the only adult home with her," he said quietly. Every time something happened, every time she acted scared, every time she shut down, you were there. Evelyn's smile returned, but it was icy, brittle. Children imagine things, Ethan. They create stories, especially sensitive children like Mabel. His voice hardened. Mabel isn't imagining anything. For the first time, Evelyn's expression slipped entirely. Her hands tensed. Her shoulders stiffened. Julian watched her closely, noting every shift. She's been terrified, Ethan continued. Terrified of someone. And the only person she acts that way around is you. A long silence settled between them. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her mask nearly gone. So that's what this is, she whispered. You're choosing her over me. Ethan's reply was immediate. I'm choosing the truth. And Evelyn finally realized her lies were no longer enough to save her. For the first time since stepping into the Carter mansion, Evelyn lost the smoothness that had always protected her. Her eyes narrowed, her breaths came quicker, and the elegant poise she relied on began to fracture. Julian stood silently by the staircase, arms crossed, observing every flicker of expression like a detective watching a suspect finally cornered. Ethan maintained his distance, though his pulse hammered in his neck. Evelyn, he said steadily, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you touch the ladder? Did you startle her? Did something happen that you're not telling me? Evelyn didn't answer. She paced instead, slow, controlled steps, like someone calculating all possible exits from a burning room. Her hands trembled before she clasped them behind her back. She fell, Evelyn snapped finally. Kids fall. You can't blame me for that. But she didn't just fall, Ethan replied. The doctor said she's been scared for a long time. Something has been happening in this house. Evelyn let out a sharp breath, somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. Ethan, if she told you I've been mistreating her, she's lying. Children lie all the time. Mabel hasn't said a word, Ethan said quietly. That's the problem. That line hit harder than anything. Evelyn's face twitched, the slightest crack in her composure, a child silent out of fear. That was something she couldn't explain away with charm. Julian stepped forward. Mrs. Carter, you may not realize this, but the pattern is clear. The security logs, the removed camera, the timing of the system resets, all of it points to deliberate tampering. Evelyn glared at him. You're overstepping. I'm doing my job, Julian replied smoothly. Someone tampered with those cameras, and someone made sure certain rooms weren't being watched. Rooms your stepdaughter was alone in. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper edged with venom. You think I'm some kind of monster? Ethan held her gaze. I think I've ignored too many red flags. Something inside Evelyn snapped. She moved closer to Ethan, her eyes burning. Everything I've done, she hissed. I've done for this family, for our future, for you. Ethan shook his head. Hurting a child isn't building a future. Her jaw clenched. You don't know what she's like when you're not home. Those words froze Ethan where he stood. Julian's eyes sharpened. What do you mean by that? Ethan asked, voice low. Evelyn looked trapped, cornered, exposed. And then she made a mistake. I mean, she said tightly, she needs discipline. She needs someone stronger than the fantasy world she hides in. Silence slammed into the room like a door shutting. Ethan stepped back slowly. You just admitted it, he whispered. You finally did. Evelyn's face drained of color, because she realized her own words had become the first piece of undeniable truth. Evelyn's slip, those few reckless words, hung in the air like smoke no one could breathe through. Ethan stared at her, stunned, as if seeing her for the first time without the layers of polish she wore like armor. Julian's posture shifted subtly, more alert, more protective, sensing the danger in the room even before Evelyn realized how deeply she had incriminated herself. Evelyn tried to recover, her voice softer now, desperate. Ethan, wait. I didn't mean it like that. You're twisting my words. You always do this when you're stressed. I'm not twisting anything, Ethan replied quietly. You said she needs someone stronger than the world she hides in. That's not discipline, Evelyn. That's control. Evelyn's expression flickered. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. She moved toward him, reaching for his hands, but Ethan stepped back. Her fingers curled in the empty space between them. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment, she insisted. Julian is feeding you paranoia. You're a father. Fathers overreact. It's normal. Julian cut in, voice steady. I'm not feeding him anything. I'm showing him what the evidence already proves. Evelyn turned on him sharply. You don't belong in our home. Julian didn't flinch. No, but the truth does. Her breath hitched. Barely, but enough for Ethan to notice. What truth? Ethan asked. What else are you hiding? Evelyn's eyes darted toward the staircase leading to the second floor. Not long enough for most people to catch, but Ethan followed her gaze instinctively. Something upstairs held significance, something she didn't want anyone to see. He took a step toward the stairs. Don't, Evelyn snapped. The sudden force in her voice startled even her. She steadied herself immediately, smoothing her blouse, lowering her tone. Ethan, please, let's talk about this. We're both upset. There's no need to escalate things. But Ethan ignored her. He walked toward the staircase slowly, his footsteps echoing through the house. With each step he took, Evelyn's composure thinned further. She followed behind him, insisting, pleading, bargaining. Ethan, please, there's nothing up there. Don't make this bigger than it is. Julian stayed close behind them, prepared for anything. When Ethan reached the top floor, he paused in the hallway. Every door looked the same, except one, Mabel's room. It was slightly ajar, as if someone had checked on it recently. But that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the faint sound, a rhythmic ticking, coming from inside the closet. Evelyn froze completely at the sound, her face drained of color. Ethan, don't open that. But the fear in her voice didn't stop him. It only confirmed that whatever was hidden behind that closet door mattered, deeply. Ethan reached forward, hand trembling slightly, and touched the knob. And in that moment, Evelyn realized her biggest secret was seconds away from being exposed. Ethan's hand hovered on the closet knob, suspended between dread and determination. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the house, as if every shadow leaned forward, waiting for the truth to break open. Behind him, Julian watched silently, ready to intervene if needed, and beside them, Evelyn stood frozen. No longer elegant, no longer composed, just exposed. Ethan, she whispered, voice shaking, please don't do this. He didn't look at her. Why not? Because, her breath caught, you won't understand what you find. That was all he needed to hear. He opened the door. The soft ticking grew louder. Ethan flicked on the closet light, revealing what at first looked like an ordinary storage space. Neatly folded blankets, labeled boxes, perfectly arranged shelves. Typical Evelyn order. But then Ethan noticed something unusual. A small device mounted high on the wall, disguised behind a neatly placed stack of linens. Julian stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Is that a sound monitor? Ethan blinked. In a child's closet. Julian removed it carefully, revealing tiny wires leading into the wall. This isn't a baby monitor, he corrected. This tracks movement, breathing patterns, stress levels. It's used in high surveillance environments. Ethan stared at the device in disbelief. Why would something like this be in Mabel's room? Evelyn swallowed hard. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Ethan demanded. She didn't answer. Julian continued searching the closet. Behind a row of boxes, he found a folder, thin, hidden but deliberate. He handed it to Ethan. Inside were printed logs, notes documenting Mabel's daily behaviors. When she woke up, when she cried, when she was disobedient, when she needed correction. Each note was written in Evelyn's handwriting. Ethan's throat tightened. You tracked her? Evelyn stepped forward, panic breaking through her voice. I wasn't tracking her. I was helping her. She needed structure. She needed someone to guide her. She was slipping into sadness, and you were too busy to see it. Ethan stared at her, horrified. Structure? Evelyn, she was terrified. She was anxious, and you were monitoring her like she was a project. You weren't here, Evelyn shouted, losing all composure. I had to manage everything. I had to keep the house together. I had to keep her together. Do you know what it's like to live with a child who cries every time you leave the room? Ethan almost stepped back from the intensity in her eyes. You don't monitor children because they're sad. You comfort them. Evelyn shook her head. She didn't need comfort. She needed discipline. Discipline didn't make her safer, Ethan whispered. It broke her. A heavy silence filled the hallway. Julian exhaled slowly. This is enough, Ethan. You need to take Mabel out of this house. Ethan closed the folder, his decision immediate and unshakable. You're right, he said. He turned to face Evelyn fully. Tonight she's not coming back here. Evelyn's face twisted, not with sadness but with rage she could no longer hide. And Ethan realized he was finally seeing the real Evelyn. Evelyn's face twisted into something Ethan had never seen. An expression stripped of politeness, stripped of charm, stripped of every mask she had ever worn. For a moment, she didn't look like the elegant woman he married. She looked cornered. Cornered animals are unpredictable. "You're not taking her anywhere," Evelyn hissed, stepping forward. Julian instinctively moved in front of Ethan, blocking her path. "Mrs. Carter," he said calmly, "I recommend you slow down." But Evelyn wasn't listening. Her voice rose in a trembling whisper, more frightening than a shout. "You think you can walk out of here and pretend I didn't hold this family together? You think you can humiliate me over her?" Ethan stiffened. "This isn't about humiliation. This is about protecting Mabel." "That girl," Evelyn snapped, "has been nothing but chaos since the day I moved in. Crying, clinging, refusing to follow simple rules. I tried, Ethan. I tried to give her structure. I tried to be what she needed." "She needed love," Ethan said quietly. Evelyn's jaw tensed. "Love doesn't fix everything." "No," he replied, "but fear never fixes anything." Something inside her broke at those words. Evelyn turned away, pacing in small, frantic circles as if searching for a version of the story she could salvage. "You weren't here," she whispered. "You were always gone, always busy. Everything fell on me, and she pushed me. She made everything harder." Ethan felt a cold ache in his chest. Not for her, but for how deeply he had misjudged her. "She's 8 years old," he said. "She wasn't supposed to carry your expectations." Evelyn spun back toward him, eyes blazing. "You're blaming me? After everything I handled? After everything I sacrificed?" Julian stepped between them again. "Mrs. Carter, take a breath. No one is blaming—" "Yes, they are," she snapped at him. "You both are." Her breathing quickened. Her hands trembled. She looked like someone watching her world collapse brick by brick, unable to stop it. Ethan exhaled slowly. "This ends tonight. Mabel stays at the hospital with me, and tomorrow my lawyer will contact you." Evelyn froze. For a moment the house was painfully silent. Then she whispered, "You're choosing her over me." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'm choosing what's right." The last of her composure shattered. She took a step toward him, too sudden, too sharp, but Julian intercepted instantly, his presence firm but non-violent. "Enough," Julian said. "This conversation is over." Evelyn looked between them, face drained of color, voice breaking. "You'll regret this." But when Ethan walked away, he felt something he hadn't felt in months, a certainty that he was finally doing the right thing. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. Ethan knew because she stayed in the hallway long after he and Julian walked away. Her silhouette reflected faintly on the polished floor as she stood frozen, breathing unevenly. She wasn't mourning a family. She was mourning control. Her carefully curated world slipping through her fingers, one unraveling thread at a time. Ethan returned to the hospital, where Mabel slept with her small hand curled around the edge of the blanket. He sat beside her, exhausted, but more awake than he had felt in months. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like evidence. And Evelyn herself. She no longer felt like a misunderstanding waiting to be fixed, but like a danger he had been too blind to see. The next morning, Ethan contacted his attorney, Mr. Langford, a calm, experienced man who did not waste time with unnecessary words. After hearing everything, the hidden monitor, the altered cameras, the notes Evelyn had been keeping on Mabel, Langford's expression turned cold. "This is a pattern of harmful behavior," he said. "Not one incident, a pattern. We'll file for an emergency protective order." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "Will the court believe me?" "It's not about belief," Langford replied. "It's about evidence, and you have more than enough." Meanwhile, Julian stayed at the mansion, documenting every piece of tampering and retrieving what remained of the security logs. What he found confirmed Ethan's worst fears. Multiple nights where cameras were disabled, timestamps matching evenings Ethan was away, entries where Evelyn had restricted certain feeds entirely. By noon, the attorney had filed the paperwork. By evening, a temporary protective order had been granted. It happened faster than Ethan expected, faster than Evelyn anticipated. When he returned home to collect a few things for Mabel, Evelyn was waiting in the living room, dressed impeccably, as if preparing to defend herself. She looked at Ethan with a fragile calmness that didn't match the fury simmering in her eyes. "I heard from the lawyer," she said softly. "Is this really the route you want to take?" "It's the route I should have taken months ago," Ethan replied. Evelyn laughed softly, an eerie, breathless sound. "You're overreacting. I never hurt her." "You scared her," Ethan said, "and being scared every day is its own form of harm." Her jaw clenched. "I gave this family everything." "You monitored a child," Ethan countered. "You erased her mother's things. You tracked when she cried. You made her afraid to speak." Evelyn stepped closer, voice trembling. "You're ruining my life." "No," Ethan said quietly. "You did that yourself." Her eyes flashed, wounded and furious, but she didn't speak again. This time, Ethan walked out the front door with no hesitation. And the house behind him, the one she had tried to control, felt suddenly smaller, emptier, and no longer hers. The courthouse in downtown Ridgewood buzzed with low murmurs, reporters stationed along the steps as though sensing a storm about to break. Ethan carried Mabel gently in his arms, careful of her healing injuries, while Julian walked beside them like a silent shield. This wasn't the life Ethan imagined months ago. He never thought he'd need to protect his daughter from inside his own home. But today was about truth, and once truth enters a courtroom, there's no undoing it. Inside, the family courtroom felt colder than the hospital. Rows of wooden benches, stacks of documents, the judge's elevated seat, all formal, heavy, intimidating. Mabel sat beside Ethan, leaning into him, eyes wide but brave. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her presence alone told the story. Evelyn entered moments later, dressed in a tailored navy suit, hair pinned perfectly, expression composed. But something was different now. Her confidence wasn't real. It was forced, tight, cracking at the edges. She walked past Ethan without a glance, though her jaw twitched when she saw Julian. Her attorney, Miss Corbin, whispered urgently to her while flipping through a binder. Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Langford, simply waited, calm and collected, with a thick file of evidence organized neatly on the table. When the judge called the case, everyone rose. "Now?" "Mr. Carter," the judge said, adjusting his glasses, "you are petitioning for a protective order and temporary sole custody of your daughter. You may present your evidence." Langford stood. "Your Honor, what we have is not a single incident but a pattern. Documented, corroborated, and deeply concerning." He began with the security footage logs Julian recovered, timestamps showing cameras disabled only when Evelyn was alone with Mabel. Then he submitted the photos of the removed device in the closet and the movement monitoring equipment Evelyn had hidden. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Next came the notes. Pages and pages of Evelyn's handwriting, recording every moment Mabel cried, flinched, hesitated, or failed to meet expectations. None of it violent, but all of it emotionally suffocating. The judge's expression darkened as he read through them silently. Miss Corbin objected, insisting the notes were misinterpreted discipline, but the judge lifted a hand. "It is not a caregiver's role to surveil a child in this manner. This alone indicates an unhealthy environment." Evelyn finally spoke, voice cracking. "I was helping her. She was falling apart and no one else noticed." Ethan looked at her, steady but heartbroken. "She was falling apart because she was afraid of disappointing you." Silence filled the room. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, your actions show a troubling lack of empathy and an over-reliance on control. This court prioritizes the emotional and physical safety of the child." Evelyn's composure shattered as the judge delivered the decision. Temporary sole custody is awarded to the father. A protective order is granted. Mrs. Carter is restricted from contact with the child pending further evaluation. Evelyn gasped, shaky, furious, defeated. And it was only then, only as the gavel struck, that Ethan realized. For the first time, Mabel was truly protected. The day after the court ruling, Ethan packed whatever belongings Mabel needed and left the mansion without looking back. The house had never felt so big, so hollow, so wrong. It was a place where shadows grew quietly, where fear hid in corners, where a little girl learned to tiptoe instead of play. Ethan knew he could never raise Mabel there again. She deserved light. Not surveillance, not cold rules, not a woman measuring her every breath. He rented a small home on the coast, far from Ridgewood's polished neighborhoods. It wasn't luxurious, just 2 bedrooms, a sunlit living room, and a patio that overlooked the ocean. But the moment Mabel walked inside, something in her posture changed. Her shoulders relaxed, her eyes softened. She breathed deeper. "This place smells like the beach," she whispered. "That's because it is the beach," Ethan said, smiling gently. "This is our new start." For the first time in weeks, Mabel smiled, small and fragile, but real. Over the next few days, life shifted into something quieter, gentler. Mabel had regular checkups with her doctors, who assured Ethan she was healing well. Not just physically, emotionally too. She slept more peacefully. She ate better. She laughed a little more each day, especially when the neighbor's cat started visiting their porch like it owned the place. Ethan spent every moment he could with her. They read together, made simple dinners, and took slow walks along the shoreline. Sometimes Mabel would slip her hand into his without saying anything. Other times, she'd glance up at him as if checking he was still there. He always was. But healing isn't quick. Some nights, Mabel woke from sleep trembling, breath shaky, asking, "Is she here?" Ethan held her, repeating softly, "You're safe. She can't hurt you. Not ever again." And each time, Mabel believed him a little more. Julian visited too, bringing warm tea for Ethan and coloring books for Mabel. He never pushed her to talk, never asked about Evelyn. Instead, he made her laugh with silly stories and let her feel normal again. As weeks passed, Mabel began painting again, something she had been too scared to do under Evelyn's watchful eyes. One morning, Ethan found her sitting at the table, quietly working on a watercolor of the ocean. The colors were soft, bright, hopeful. "Who's this one for?" he asked. Mabel looked up, eyes shining. "For you!" Ethan felt his throat tighten. He knelt beside her and kissed the top of her head. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." As she returned to painting, Ethan stepped outside, looking at the horizon. For the first time in a long time, he felt peace settling into his bones. His daughter was healing. He was healing. And the life Evelyn tried to control was finally, truly theirs again. Life in the quiet coastal town had begun to take on a gentle rhythm, one that Mabel and Ethan fell into naturally. Every morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, warming the small kitchen where Ethan brewed coffee and Mabel stirred cereal with sleepy eyes. The chaos and tension of the mansion felt like a distant, fading memory, replaced by ocean breezes, the sound of gulls, and the unmistakable comfort of safety. One afternoon, while Mabel was painting on the porch, Ethan received a phone call that surprised him. It was the mayor's office from Ridgewood. At first, he assumed it had something to do with paperwork or follow-up legal proceedings. Instead, the assistant spoke warmly. "Mr. Carter, we've reviewed what happened with your daughter. Your transparency and courage in bringing the situation to light helped uncover gaps in child protection oversight. We'd like to honor you at the upcoming Community Advocates Ceremony." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Honor me? I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just protected my daughter." "Sometimes," the assistant replied, "doing the right thing is extraordinary." He hung up, humbled and quiet. He didn't tell Mabel yet, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he didn't ever want her to feel like her pain became someone else's spotlight. Still, the recognition meant something. It meant doors might open for families who didn't have the resources or support Ethan had. A few days later, Julian visited again. Mabel practically ran to him, handing him a drawing she'd made, a watercolor of him standing heroically on the beach, wearing sunglasses far too large. Julian laughed. "Is this my superhero origin story?" Mabel nodded confidently. "You saved us." Julian glanced at Ethan, who looked away, swallowing emotion. "Your dad saved you," Julian corrected softly. "I just helped him see what was already there." Mabel beamed, hugging him tightly before returning to her paints. That evening, Ethan sat on the patio, watching the waves roll in. Julian joined him, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know," he said, "most people in your position would have ignored the signs. You didn't." "I almost did," Ethan admitted. "I should have seen it sooner." "But you saw it when it mattered," Julian replied. "And you made the hard choice." Ethan considered that. Maybe he wasn't perfect. Maybe he'd made mistakes, but he was here, now, present, protective, rebuilding. The community advocate ceremony took place the following week. Ethan didn't want to make a spectacle, but the mayor insisted. He stood on stage holding a small plaque while the audience applauded. He didn't speak long, just enough to say, "Children tell the truth without words. We just have to listen." When he returned home, Mabel hugged him tightly. "Did you win something, Daddy?" He knelt, showing her the plaque. "We won it together." Her smile widened, full and bright. In that moment, Ethan realized the real reward wasn't recognition or applause or a plaque. It was the little girl holding on to him with absolute trust. The coastal breeze carried the faint scent of salt and blooming jasmine as Ethan adjusted Mabel's dress before her first school performance. She stood backstage, clutching her small ribbon-covered program, cheeks flushed with a mixture of nerves and excitement. It was the first time in months she had been part of something joyful, something normal, and seeing her this way, bright-eyed and confident, filled Ethan's chest with a warmth he had feared he might never feel again. "You're going to do amazing," he whispered. Mabel smiled, not the fragile smile she used to force, but a genuine one, steady, unbroken, full of light. When the curtain lifted, Mabel stepped onto the stage with her classmates. Soft music played, and she performed each movement with surprising grace, her healed arms swaying gently, her once-injured leg carrying her without hesitation. In the front row, Ethan's eyes stung with emotion as he watched his daughter dance. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but freely. Freedom. That was what this moment represented. When the performance ended, applause filled the auditorium. Mabel scanned the crowd until she found him, and when she did, her face lit up like sunrise. Ethan stood with the rest of the parents, clapping until his palms tingled. Afterward, she ran into his arms. "Daddy, did you see me?" "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," he said, lifting her briefly before setting her down carefully. "You were incredible." Julian, who had joined them quietly, gave Mabel a playful salute. "Superstar material. Do I need to ask for your autograph now?" She giggled, something that had once been rare but now came easily. Later that evening, back at their coastal home, Ethan received a final update from his attorney. Evelyn had been ordered by the court to complete a long-term psychological evaluation and was legally restricted from contacting Mabel indefinitely. With the evidence presented, the judge granted Ethan permanent sole custody. There would be no appeal, no loopholes, no return. Justice, quiet but firm, had spoken. After the call, Ethan stepped onto the porch where Mabel was painting the ocean again. She looked up at him with calm, steady eyes that no longer carried fear. "Everything okay, Daddy?" she asked. He sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Everything's better than okay," he said. "We're finally safe." She leaned against him, resting her head on his chest. The sky above them shifted into hues of gold and lavender as the sun lowered behind the waves. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'm not scared anymore." Ethan closed his eyes, letting those words wash over him like the tide. This was their life now, quiet, safe, honest, whole. A life rebuilt, a family restored, a future wide open. And for the first time in a long, painful journey, Ethan believed they were exactly where they were meant to be. And just like that, our story comes to a close. You're still here, right? If you're watching until this moment, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, honest way. So let's take a breath together and look at this from a deeper angle, almost like two friends talking at the end of a long day. This story reminds us that healing begins the moment we choose truth over comfort. In life, there are times when we must protect what matters, even when it feels difficult or inconvenient. The Stoic Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Ethan learned this the hard way, but his courage gave his daughter a chance to breathe again, to grow again, to trust again. And that is something every one of us can carry into our own lives. You don't need a perfect world to heal, just one honest decision at a time. So, my wonderful friends watching right now, if this story touched you, if it made you reflect or feel or simply pause for a moment, then don't keep that feeling to yourself. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who might need it, and subscribe to join us for more stories that speak to the heart. Your presence here matters. Thank you for being with us today.